All right, friends, welcome back to History with Tim. So, on Wednesday, I put up a video discussing the assassination attempt on President Donald J. Trump. During that video, I also talked about bringing up that I will be making a video discussing what happened this past Sunday. That's Sunday the 21st. Now, for those of you that do not know, on Sunday the 21st in the afternoon, President Joe Biden announced that he will not be running for re-election. This very much so caused a very big upcry in the political theater. Questions were had of what was going to happen. And much like the assassination attempt, I wanted to wait until we actually heard from President Biden. Last night, President Biden made an address from the Oval Office. It was an interesting address. It really did not, in my opinion, explain the actual reasons behind his resignation. In fact, it kind of just sounded like him trying to protect his legacy, which, you know, the reality is for politicians, legacy isn't a very important thing. But real quick, I'm going to go into the history of really the Democratic Party as a whole and what is happening currently. So, the Democratic Party was actually, you know, in movies like Lincoln, they say the Democratic Party was founded by the likes of Thomas Jefferson, which is true and false. The Democratic Republican Party was the party founded by Thomas Jefferson in opposition to Alexander Hamilton and John Adams' Federalist Party. Now, the Federalist Party was the party that believed in a strong central government to control not control, but to keep order in the country, whereas the Democratic Republicans believed in states' rights and pretty much it was the liberal party, as the Democrats later did become. It was, let us live our lives, mind our own business, we don't want big government, things like that. Fast forward to 1828, following the presidency of Andrew Jackson, who is considered the modern founder of the Democratic Party. So the party that we today see as the Democratic Party is founded by Andrew Jackson. In fact, his stubbornness is why the party symbol is a donkey. Because I know that's probably a question a lot of people have, why a donkey? Same thing. And I'll do a video on the Republicans as well, while I explain all their things. But the Democrats' symbol became the donkey, and Martin Van Buren will become the first Democrat, Democrat Party president, following Andrew Jackson, which Martin Van Buren was also from New York. Also, English was not his first language, a fun fact. The Democrat Party will kind of run pretty much unopposed until the Civil War, mainly because it will be the election of a man from a new coming party, the Republican Party, the GOP, under Abraham Lincoln. That will be where we have the new two-party system come in. Because, again, the Democrat Party, to be honest, it was the party of the wealthy in a way. Because what happens is when you have a long period that you were pretty much because of course parties like the Whigs still existed, you had abolitionist parties, but none of them were large. The Democrat Party was large, and it was kind of unchallenged from 1828 to 1860. Now, fun fact is actually they probably could have won the election of 1860, but what ended up happening was they ran two Democrats. The Southern Democrats did not believe that the Northern choice, Stephen Douglas, was going to actually represent them. So the Southern Democrats ran James Buchanan's vice president, John Breckinridge, who would actually later become a Confederate general. But he would run, and it would split the Democratic vote right down the middle. Very similar to what will happen in the election of 1912, when Theodore Roosevelt unfortunately splits the Republican Party in half, which leads the way to Woodrow Wilson's victory. But up to this point, the Democratic Party was very much the party of in the South, at least, they were the party of the wealthy plantation class, very pro-slavery, anti-abolitionist, and in the North, they were very pro-immigrant. Now, the reason they were pro-immigrant is because of places like Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall, I as a New Yorker, Tammany Hall holds a very dark chapter in the history of New York. That's Boss Tweed. That's the corruption in the city. The courthouse in New York City is actually where Tammany Hall used to be, and Tammany Hall built it. But so that was the distinctions then, and the Republican or the GOP were viewed as the party of the upper class and the abolitionists, those who looked to free the slaves. Obviously, from 1861 to 1865, we will have the American Civil War, which will result in a few million Americans dying. And then for a period, the Democratic Party pretty much was the party of opposition. Now, this is where I'm going to explain how the American system's different than other systems. So, for example, in England, you have a parliamentarian system. So what that means is you don't vote for your leader, because one, in England, their head of government and head of state are two separate people. So their head of state is King Charles III, but their head of government is Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, as of right now, holds the most seats in Parliament. We could go over to France, for example, too. Let me just make sure I get this right, because I don't want to get it wrong, because they just went through an election, and I don't want to mess it up. So, the French National Assembly, right now, they created a coalition government. So, their whole thing was they did not want the, I believe this is it, République En Marche group, that I believe is the party under Marie Le Pen. Yes. So pretty much what ended up happening was... Oh no, National Rallies under Marie Le Pen. Okay, so what happened was En Marche is actually... Or Renaissance, that's actually... Now I'm correcting myself. Renaissance is a moderate party that is the party of President Emmanuel Macron. His party won 99 seats. However... National Rally, which is the Conservative Party, won 126 seats. So in theory, in the 577 seat legislature, National Rally would be the majority. But what En Marche did, or Renaissance, I'll just call it Renaissance because Marchand it's not called that anymore. What Renaissance ended up doing was they made a coalition government with the Democratic groups and Horizons and affiliated other national parliamentarian groups, pretty much left party groups, to join and make a coalition government that the president, Emmanuel Macron's party, is still involved, but now the right party is no longer a contestant, because now the government is 166 seats compared to National Rally, which is 126. Now, in France, it's a little different than England, because in France, their head of government is actually Emmanuel Macron, the president, whereas their head of state, as of today, is still I don't actually believe they have a head. Well, technically, they don't have a prime minister at this time because of everything going on. They just had their election. So, yeah, they still don't have a prime minister yet. People are demanding a prime minister, though. But the prime minister will be the head of government, whereas Macron is the head of state. Russia is a federal system, much like us in a way, but it's also like France. You have Vladimir Putin, who is the head of government, and then you have the prime minister, who is the head of state. Now, the United States is not like that. The United States, we don't have party leaders. So, for example, the leader of the Conservative Party in England is Rishi Sunak, who was just previously the prime minister, and the political leader of the Labour Party is Keir Starmer. Now, the English people did not select these two men to be the leaders of their parties. What happened was the people voted for their member of the government, and then their member of the government chose a party leader, and that's who ran the party. It's very different here in the United States. So, for example, the Democratic Party, we have a committee that runs the Democratic Party. Our committee, the chairman of the Democratic Party is Jamie Harrison. He is one of about several other individuals who are in charge of the Democratic National Committee. Now, technically, the leader of the Democratic Party is President Joe Biden. He holds the highest office, and he was elected by the people. So he is technically the leader of the Democratic Party. That's going to change later, though. And then in the House, the leader of the Democrats, who are the minority party, will be Hakeem Jeffries from New York. And the head of the Senate, who is the majority leader, is Chuck Schumer, also from New York. So those are the delegations that way of how our parties work. But another thing with our parties, excuse me as I fix myself real quick, our parties also work off a primary system. Now, this is going to get a little confusing to people. I completely understand that, because it is confusing, and it's meant to be confusing, to be completely honest. But let me discuss what recently happened, what happened this Sunday. This Sunday, President Biden finally declared that he will not be running for re-election. Very strange. It's very late in the election season to be doing this. We're less than 3 months? So, yeah, less than 3 months until the presidential election. The last time a situation like this happened will be in the 1968. And that will be following the... Let me just make sure I got that date right. Make sure I got that date right, everyone. Yes. It will be in the 1960s when Robert F. Kennedy, brother of President John F. Kennedy, will be assassinated in California. Now, Robert Kennedy was the leader, so to speak, because he was the one that won the most delegates. But he was assassinated very close to the convention. What this did now was it caused what became known as a open convention. Now, what is an open convention? An open convention is, we don't have a nominee. What do we do? And to be honest, 1968, okay. So, to be honest, this is actually how the conventions used to work. So, for those of you that don't know, every 4 years, it's actually every year technically, but every 4 years there's a big party national convention. The Republican National Convention just passed. The Democratic National Convention will be in August. Now, what this does is this causes a, well, let me explain this in the way it used to be. The way it used to be was you did not actually vote for the president in a primary as we have today. What it was you would vote, if you were a party member, you would vote for your delegate. Your delegate would go to wherever the national convention was, and then your delegate would choose for you. It's very similar to our electoral college system. This is how actually Abraham Lincoln became the Republican, because no one actually believed Lincoln would be anywhere near it, but because he had spinners there for him that were able to convince people to vote for him, he won the nomination. So pretty much what would happen is it would be about a week long. All the delegates would go to a specific city. This year the Republican convention was in Milwaukee, and the Democratic convention will be in Chicago. They'll meet, they'll discuss, and then they'll have a few waves of votes. And you need to win the majority. You need the absolute majority vote. So it's kind of similar to the papal elections, how if you don't get a certain amount of votes, you don't get the job. Now, this is how we used to do it until the primary system became a little more streamlined. So the way the Republican primary system works is the people vote per state. It's not, oh, I'm voting for a delegate, because you are still voting for a delegate, but there's multiple delegates. Now, what does this mean? What this means is, regardless of how many delegates there are, if for example, what happened in Florida, President Trump won the majority of the delegates. Now, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley won other delegates in other states, so they had those delegates. But by the end of the primary season, Trump had won the majority of delegates, and that's why he went to the RNC and just accepted the nomination. Simple as that. The Democrats have a little bit of a different system. So you have delegates and superdelegates. Now, a delegate is just like everyone else. You know, you vote, they have to vote how you vote. So, say I'm from Brooklyn, and I voted for Joe Biden. My delegate is now sworn to Joe Biden. But they also have superdelegates. Now, superdelegates are what you would call party bosses. So that's people like Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, President Obama, President Clinton, Secretary Clinton. These are party leaders. They're high up, and their vote counts more. Famously, in 2016, this is how they were able to beat the primary system. For those of you that remember, Senator Sanders was actually winning the popular vote in most states, but he wasn't winning superdelegates, and Hillary Clinton won the superdelegates. So it really doesn't matter so much that you win the delegates. You need to win those superdelegates. You need to win the party bosses in order to secure the nomination. So why explain all this? Well, because what happens now is you have President Biden resigning. Not as president, he's still president. He's already said, he said last night he will be serving his 6 months until the new president comes in, whoever that may be. But he has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as his successor, so to speak. And there's a big question now of what happens next. Now, you have party bosses, you know, people like the Clintons, President and Secretary Clinton, Representative Pelosi, Senator Schumer. You have all these folks who've come out and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. But you also have other superdelegates like President Obama who said, I'm not endorsing yet. But what's happening now is you have people in the primary level and primary delegates. Very famously, a few days ago, Black Lives Matter, the organization, made a public statement demanding a new primary because they feel disenfranchised. They feel you can't be declaring you're fighting for democracy and you're standing for democracy and then you install a successor. They believe there should be a primary. There should be a snap primary to make sure that this is the people's choice. Now, in the news, there's a lot of people saying a lot of things. And why am I covering this? Why is Tim? Tim stays clear of politics. Tim tries not to talk modern politics. But after the assassination attempt on President Trump, and then the announcement that President Biden will not be running, we're living in historic times, friends. We have to be involved in some level. I'm not going to take a side because, to be honest, they both are terrible. I'm very centrist. I like to call myself a Washingtonian in my belief system. I'm very much a anti interventionist. I believe we should probably just mind our business. I don't really care. I'm very much a leave me alone. I don't want to be involved kind of person. But those people with platforms need to discuss these things. And this is a wild time to be alive. You know, like I said, I watched President Biden's speech yesterday because I should. And we all should, because we need to be educated on what's going on. And to be honest, that is why I believe the president decided he will not run again, because I believe he saw what happened at the debate as very bad for him and his party. But with that said, the damage might already be done with all of that, because the mission now for the Democratic Party is to regain the trust of the American people. You can have your opinions on Donald Trump, that's fine. You can have your opinions on Joe Biden, that's fine. But the reality is, this is very strange. This does not happen. And you can't just take someone that party bosses want to have in charge and then ignore the primary. Because then at that point, there's no point to even have a primary. There's no point to have card-carrying members of your party. It's very interesting times ahead. I will be having some more videos out this week. Like I said, I will be discussing the Republican Party in a little more detail, and I will do a whole video dedicated to the Democratic Party and a few other American political parties that sadly no longer exist. But thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one.